And here's your host, Goody.
Welcome to the Gabbin Goody Podcast. I'm your host, Goody. Today, episode 9, coming from my childhood home with a very, very special guest, Mama Goody, Mrs. G, my mother. Again, thank you for opening up the home, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start our little conversation.
So, my name is Cindy. I'm Andrew's mom. I have 2 children, my older daughter Amber and Andrew. I have 4 grandchildren. Andrew has 2 boys, Lane and Dawson, and then my daughter has 2 little girls, Coco and Cora. I've been married to a wonderful man, his name is Wayne, for 45 years, and I've known him for over 50. I hate to say that number because that is a big number.
50. I mean, well, they'd say that it's just a number.
Just a number, yeah.
You know, as again, thank you for being on the podcast. And normally here on the podcast, we talk about all sorts of different stuff, family, parenting, and marriage and everything. And we're gonna continue to talk about that as we continue to have great conversations, hopefully that are helping some people. But as my mother said, 45 years of marriage and over 50 years of knowing my father. And I guess a lot of people would probably ask you, what is the secret, or what is the, I guess we'll give your advice to people who are striving to have that kind of longevity in their relationships.
Oh, so I guess it's a different era now. Back in those days, in the 70s, you know, people got married, you seem to be married for a long time.
Yep.
So we try to listen to each other. We make all our decisions together. You know, people change as you get older, but you have to move along, and I feel like don't give up. And you know, our interests changed over the years. You know, we first got married, we traveled, did things together, you know, went here and there, and then, you know, you start having children, and then your focus is on your kids, and, you know, your dad has a big family, so he has 10 sisters, and he had 4 brothers. There were 15 altogether, so you can imagine, back in that time, Christmas, parties, anything like that, they did without a lot. There were a lot of hand-me-downs and things like that. So when you and your sister came along, Dad's a great provider, and he always wanted you guys to have a little bit more. But we lived within our means, and we never did anything extravagant. We were both hard workers, and we'd save, but we did a lot of stuff that didn't cost money, that was family oriented, and you kids seemed to enjoy it, and we were grateful to have, you know, Grandma and Jaju around, especially Jaju, because, you know, as you kids, you and Amber and my nephew Eric were growing up, my dad did a lot. He loved the kids around, he took them boating, he took them fishing. It was just, you know, we were grateful for that. But, you know, it's a different age. I feel like some people don't work hard. Marriage is something you have to work at, and it changes as you get older. And, you know, your father and I haven't always had great times together, but that's part of marriage. You got to work through it, and I tend to be bossy, I guess you could call it, but I always
comment.
I used to always, you know, mainly, you know, things kind of always went my way. Tried to sort of relieve him from decisions, but anything major, we always did everything together. We never, I knew what my boundaries were with my husband, so, and very rarely did I ever see my husband get mad. We never really fought in front of the kids or anything. If it was something, not that we ever really fought, but, you know, dirty laundry doesn't come out. That's not something do in front of your children, or you should always be mindful when you're around young children. Doesn't always work that way,
Yeah.
but
Sometimes
yeah.
it's tough, and and to kind of hash on a few things that you said, and we have talked about this in multiple episodes of the podcast before. What I was calling the three stages of marriage, being the time when you meet your significant other, the time that you have your kids, and then the time after kids. So it's almost like you fall in love with the person, then you're all about your kids. You fall in love with your kids, and then after the kids, you have to fall back in love. Is what I was saying, and I think with what my mom was saying there is that it is something that both of you need to kind of work together with, and that's something that my parents always did, and they knew the importance of family and family values. Obviously, my dad, coming from a large family, my mother not such a large family, but a very bonded family, and they had, like my mom was saying, equal values, and communication. Like my mom said, over 50 plus years of being with my dad, and they were able to make it this long by, like she said, making those important decisions together, and having that common ground. And yeah, and I would say that's something that was instilled into myself and hopefully my sister, I assume so. But we, with my marriage, as I brought up in the podcast with my wife, we try to talk things out together. And I too sometimes am a proponent of the happy wife, happy life mentality. So my wife does, she's also a very strong-willed, strong-minded woman, hardworking, and I try to be, like my dad and be a hands-on dad with my kids.
You certainly are.
So
You certainly are.
I do what I can, and another thing that you had brought up is the doing things, and the way you put it was doing things that don't cost money. And that was something that when I had Lane, that I had talked to Christina about, stressing the importance of doing like these, instead of taking that vacation to Disneyland every year, or Disney World. Disneyland would be a little bit farther away, but taking that trip to Disney every year, maybe showing them the value of taking that trip to, Maine, taking that trip to New Hampshire, taking the trip to Vermont. And I wanted my kids to appreciate like these, you can have that same magic, right? As we experienced recently when we went up to New Hampshire, and going to places like Santa's Village. You can have that magic in a smaller venue, and that was something that growing up, when we talked about vacations on the podcast with my best friend, Jim.
Jimmy, my second son.
Yeah,
I love you, James.
There you go. He got to share in those moments where we would go to places like, at the time, Great Escape.
Great Escape. Lake George.
Going to Lake George, doing mini golfing and things like that. Like we got to experience a lot, and it wasn't always, Disney, even though we did go to Disney, but I think it made it that much more special to go to a place like Disney, once or twice, to enjoy it, like for that time, and be like, oh yeah, I went there, but also it was almost as important for us to go on like that summer vacation,
Yep.
with my parents, my grandparents, my friends. Like it was just as special for me, at least. And like I said, I try to instill that now in my children, where as I do see, the people going out there and being like, hey, we're going to Disney. Hey, we went to Disney. Hey, we're going to Disney. And I almost feel like, going to Disney like 4 or 5 times a year is kind of like you're really just taking and people will disagree with me.
I'm sure they will, but
I feel like you take away the allure of Disney
being special.
when you go, every year or twice a year or whatever it is. And more power to those people who do that. Because
Yeah.
I know a bunch of people who do it. They save up their money. I don't know. Disney is just a crazy money grab.
You don't like crowds.
I don't
You
like
never
crowds.
did.
That's true.
We've had when he's talking about vacations, we've been going to Maine since Amber was like 15 months old. We started out in Wayne and I had gone when Amber was just young. His boss at the time, Manny Martins, had said, "Oh, they love going to Maine. They go to this place called the Dunes and blah blah blah." So we went like for a long weekend, and we had a great time. And we thought, "Oh, we're gonna go next year. We'll go again." And at that time, Amber was probably about 15 months old. We left after work or whatever. I don't remember the details of it. I wasn't working at the time. I originally was worked at Monarch Life Insurance Company when Wayne and I first got married. I was there for just under 10 years. But when I got pregnant and had Amber in the 80s, there weren't all these daycares like you have all over here. And I didn't have anybody. My mom couldn't stay with her. My sister was working full time. My in-laws were older, because again, Wayne is number 14 out of 15, and so they were older, and I couldn't expect them. So I wasn't able to go back to work. So my job was to take care of my children, Amber, take care of the house, make sure everything was good. That's what I was doing. I didn't start working at Randall's until a little bit later, and I was working at night because, again, didn't have anybody to watch her during the day. So we started going to Maine, and we ended up going back up to Maine that second time, stopping at the hotel. Now it was late. It was like 7 o'clock. They had just given out the last room, and we're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? So now we're driving down Route 1, no vacancy, no vacancy, no vacancy, and it's getting dark, and I'm like, oh gosh, Wayne, what are we gonna do? Well, we were gonna turn around and go home because we literally couldn't find a place to stay. And then all of a sudden we turn down the street, we see the sign with some cottages, whatever. We got the room there, stayed for a couple nights, and then we started staying there for like the next 17 years, bringing the kids. Then my mom and dad were coming along because, my parents did a lot for us. So that's how we started with vacations, and we always went to Maine during 4th of July week, and then sometime in August we would go somewhere else. And then when Amber started on a traveling soccer team, we started camping a lot. So we had a pop-up for a while. Remember in Rhode Island, we went to a tournament in Rhode Island.
The
hurricane.
Yes,
Oh my God.
Pop-up, yep, I do remember that.
Yeah, thank God. Like, we made it through the hurricane. And then eventually, we had the pop-up for a few years, and then we finally traded in and got a little tow-behind trailer. And then that's when like all the fun like really began. We were camping a lot. We were camping a little bit in Maine, but we were going to Lake George. We were going to the White Mountains. I mean, going along the Kangamangas, seeing the man in the mountain. Like, I feel like our kids were fortunate enough to see a lot of places, even though it was all New England. They were still able to see a lot, had a good time. As they got a little older, they were able to bring their friends. So obviously when they got a little older in high school, the girls got to sleep in the bunk beds in the camper, and then the boys either had to pop a tent there and be out in the tent, or for a while there, my husband used to have the camper, what was the top? He used to have the top on the back of the truck, so we'd get an air mattress, blow it up, and him and Jimmy would be sleeping out there. And then at one point I found out that Andrew was sleeping in the back of the truck Jimmy was sleeping in the bed of the truck because somebody was snoring
Oh,
too
man, it was
loud or
bad.
something.
I mean, I can't say that now because I snore pretty bad now, but back then, you know, we had an air mattress in the back of, like, my mom said, in the bed of my dad's truck, and there was just a night where I was just like, wow, and I slept in the back seat of my 1996 Pontiac Bonneville.
Oh, that's right. I was trying to think. I thought it was the car. I knew it wasn't the truck. I
So
knew
I-
you didn't sleep in the truck, but I knew.
Yeah, so I slept in the back seat of my car, and yeah, those were, I mean, like she said, fun times, and like, you know, like, even though it was just in New England, like I got to see these things. I mean, you referenced the Man in the Mountain, that doesn't even exist anymore. It's
No,
gone.
we were there that year that it fell, and it was like, oh my God, I
You
couldn't
drive-
even believe it. You drive by it.
Drive by it now, you wouldn't even know it was there. It's
Yeah.
like completely wiped off. We actually, on the way up to Santa's Village this
Yeah.
last time, we passed it, and I'm like, I think that's it. But Christina's like, well, what is it? I'm like, it's nothing now. It's
No.
nothing. I'm like, it used to be a man's face in the
Well,
mountain.
that's the
Kind
way the rock formation one. Yes,
Yeah.
it was. It definitely was. And you know, if we weren't going to Maine, we'd like, okay, the kids we always went back to the same places.
Yeah.
Not because yes, we wanted to. I don't know how to explain that, but I'd say, okay, where are we gonna go? Oh, let's go to Lake George. And we used to camp like around the area, like Lake Lucerne, like Sebago Lake. We used to go, and that was the same way in Maine, like Sebago Lake. We used to camp all around the area, not per se like right where we used to stay in Wells Beach. So I like, where Lake George. You want to go to Lake George again? Yeah, yeah. They loved it. They loved the camping. We always picked a campground that was good for the kids, that always had a arcade, always had a pool, always had activities so that, you know, they could hang out, because we weren't always on the go. And then when we were doing vacations, we did go to Disney twice. We took them with my mom and dad when they were, oh, you guys were young,
Yes.
maybe third grade and sixth grade, 6 and 3 maybe. And then we went later in 2000. We went for the Millennium, and that was a wonderful vacation. Just, it was the 4 of us. Yeah, for me, it was one of our best vacations. It was really, we got to see a lot, and we stayed off park, and then Wayne and I were going to go to on our 25th anniversary. We were like, oh, why don't we go back to California? Let's like recreate our honeymoon. Yeah, well, we brought the kids with us. So
I mean,
yeah,
that's a gift.
I mean, they were a little bit old. They always wanted to come. Like, I'm grateful that my kids, even now, like to come and do things with us, because for me, my family is like, and that's the way it was with my mom and dad. And you know, if my in-laws were around a lot longer, it would have been the same. But unfortunately, my father-in-law passed away. Amber was only like 3 years old. Andrew never got to meet him because he died just before Andrew was born. So that makes me sad, because my father-in-law was a great guy.
Well, yes.
He had a lot of fun.
He lives on through many memories
Yeah.
and stories through my parents, and yeah, way to kill the mood there, Mom. Jeez.
I know, it got me a little emotional,
Yeah,
but
I get it.
I think it was great, you know, because he had so many plans, like especially for your sister. He's like, because my father-in-law was a mechanic, my husband too, but they both worked for the DPW, and my father-in-law he just adored her. And it's sad that he didn't have enough time with her, because he's ready. He had her on the tractor, he had her out in the yard, he was ready to show her how to change tires, and he said, yep, she needs to know all these things. And I'm like, okay. And he was just a gentle soul, and he was a good guy. He was really a good guy.
Yeah.
And yeah,
That legacy lives on through all us Goodrow men.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. They're like, they'll say, "Oh, Goodrow, are you related to?" Yeah, more than likely, we're related. Yeah, because they're.
Everyone asks me, "Oh, do you know so and so?" Yeah, sure, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, Angela say that, but you know, my in-laws had larger. You know, back in those days, That's what they did. They just had a lot of children. My mother-in-law had 15, and my mother-in-law was very petite. My father-in-law was a good-sized guy, but my mother-in-law was petite. And I remember she was a big photo taker, all these photo albums and everything, looking through them. And I remember flipping through, and I saw this beautiful two bride and grooms, and I was like, oh my God, this woman is beautiful. This couple is very handsome. And I said to my husband, who are these people? Like, are they your great aunt? And he goes, that's my mother and father. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, that's my mom and dad. I'm fortunate to have a copy of that picture, and I have a picture of my grandparents too, you know, the older ones. But I remember I was always afraid of my mother-in-law because she was kind of stern. But over the years, it got better, and she was great with the kids, always good with the kids, always very generous with them. And I remember talking one day, and I says to her, 15 kids. You would never know that she had 15 kids. That's how petite she was. I'm like, oh my God, like 15. Like, were you happy? She's like, I was happy for every single one. I loved having all those kids. And granted, there's like between the oldest sibling and like Wayne, there's a 20-year difference. She was, you know, almost every year, 2 years, she was having a baby. I ask Wayne sometimes, obviously he knows his siblings, but they were never actually in the same house at the same time. Because by the time he was growing up, a few of his brothers were in the service. The sisters were out working, had gotten married. You know, you were getting married younger. I mean, nowadays, kids are getting married in their 30s, you know, and having kids in their 40s. And so it's a later, no one gets married in their 20s anymore, early 20s. I was young, I was 21 when I got married, but I knew your father a long time. I met him through his niece, which was my best friend in high school, Lisa, and her dad, Richard, and Wayne were brothers, and Richard was number 2 in line for the eldest. So I remember like hanging around with her and stuff, and meeting her Uncle Dennis and her cousin Bobby, because Dennis was only a few years older than I am, or more than a few, but so they all hung around together because the family was close. And then all of a sudden, you know, oh, this is my Auntie Judy, I'm like, oh my God, like how many people are there? And she goes, well, I have 10 aunts, and you know, my brother has, you know, my dad has 4 other brothers. And I'm like, oh, 15, like. So when I got to be a little more friendly with Wayne, we were like a trio. It was Wayne was driving us everywhere, like he was taking us doing things, because he's a little bit older than us. And then when I got a little bit older, we started, you know, being a little bit more than friends. And you know, we were together for 5 years, and then we got married and did a lot of stuff before we had the kids, because we got married in '79, and Amber came along in 1985, and then we had Andrew. But we traveled a lot. We did a lot of things. And when I was not working, before I started working part-time at Randall's, even before that, I spent a lot of times, I was grateful to have the summers off with the kids because they were young. And when I say do things that don't cost money, we went to a lot of places. I had the kids, all the activities at the library, which is like phenomenal. I mean, even more than when you kids were, you know, we used to go to the park all the time. I had other friends that had kids the same age, and we used to do play groups together, and we always did picnics. We'd go to McCrae's farm, or we'd go up to Quabbin, or we'd go to Whitney Park, because my friend lived right across from Whitney Park. And we just always found things to do to keep the kids busy. You know, nowadays technology is just too much for me. Ask any of my kids, because when I get a phone or something on the computer, I'm like, no, I don't want to know. You come and do it.
She does. She's getting there though. We're getting her there.
I'm like, it's not like I can't do it, I don't want to.
Yeah.
It's not that I can't, I don't want to. I don't want to sit there to figure it out. That's not something that's enjoyable to me. So I don't like that.
Yeah, and back then too. I mean, a lot of stuff like back in the day, like the parks, like you brought up, like the wooden park.
Yeah.
Like the wooden park was phenomenal until someone gets hurt. And
Yeah.
you gotta tear it down, and that's like things were like I don't know I don't want to say different. I want to say things were like simpler back then.
Yeah.
And like you said, as much as technology has come along and like helped out in ways, you are right where technology does take away from that, like wanting to be outside and wanting to, go places and do things. And like now, like going places like entails like going to, you're going to the store, or you're going to like an arcade, or you're going to like this trampoline park.
Yeah.
Like it's yeah, I guess different. We'll just say different. It is different, and I think that, like you said, we were able to do all those things, and like that made us see the importance of those things, of being, together, being outside, active.
Mm-hmm.
My son now is, my plan, and I told my wife, I'm like, I want him to be active every season,
Yeah.
So that means now fall is soccer, winter is basketball, spring is baseball, and then, in the summer he's at summer camp. And like that was important, and that was what basically we were doing here. When we got to that middle school or
Yeah.
like, older elementary school age, like it was Amber was soccer. Amber was, Amber did track. Amber did basketball a little bit. But I was like, for me, it was like basketball, football, soccer. We did like all these different things. And like that kind of stressed the importance of being active. And I think nowadays, like you do find, like I'm trying to keep Lane
Yeah.
interested. in-
Well, yeah, that too. I have to say though, and Amber was in Girl Scouts for a little while. So the way we felt, like if you wanted to try something, like you had to see it through. We were not the parents that say, okay, if you go and you don't like it, you don't have to do it. Doesn't work that way. You got to follow through. There's things in life that you're not going to like. You're going to have to learn how to cope. Fortunately, the kids did very well. They were active. I did the gymnastics for them at the Boys and Girls Club. Andrew didn't really like that.
No.
Amber didn't mind it. She liked it, but yeah. And then she decided she wanted to do dance, or all of our little mom group together. The girls, well, why don't we try putting them in dance? Okay, she loved it. She danced for 15 years, enjoyed it immensely, had a great time. Amber was in the band in high school, played the flute. She did a phenomenal job with that. Andrew was a very good soccer player. Unfortunately, we had not a very good experience. We rode it through, and his father didn't want to, but we wrote it out, and a few bad apples sometimes. So we're like, Andrew, you don't have to do it anymore. You're not going to do it. And then he found football, and I was a little nervous because all that smashing and banging and everything. And then him and Jimmy became good friends in elementary and then in junior high. But football and volleyball were definitely lifesavers, I think, for Andrew, and he did well. He did very, very well. He was a very good football player. Their team almost had it. They, almost made it to the Super Bowl, but dang. And we haven't really had that great of a football team.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, that
Yeah.
stresses the importance of. And I had a conversation. We have an individual who is a senior at the high school now. He comes to comes to the fire department
Oh,
because
yeah.
he's interested in
Yep. you
in
kinda-
being a
yep.
firefighter. So I had the conversation with him the other day about, sports and, having a different mindset going into college. Because when I went and I was playing, I had played football since the 4th grade. And
But they didn't per se have a
so, yeah,
team.
and that was they didn't have a team. So the college I went to, Anna Maria College, right outside of Worcester, they had sports there, but they didn't have any of the sports that I played.
Yeah.
So they didn't have volleyball for men. They didn't have football at the time. And to be honest, and I had told this to the individual, I said, my mindset coming out of high school was I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time as an athlete in high school, but slowly as I got older, it started finding the realization that it wasn't in it for me after that. And the career that I have chosen, being a firefighter, I had to kind of make that decision. Do I want to risk it, go to college, and potentially get hurt and not be able to pursue my dream of being a firefighter? Or do I go to college, go to school, enjoy my time there, and focus on studies and extracurricular stuff? And that was the decision I made. And like I said, I had the conversation with this individual, and I just wanted him to think about it, because firefighting and it entails a lot of physical activity, and if you do, unfortunately, have an unlucky event where, say you hurt your back, you hurt your neck, you hurt your, something bad happens. You can pretty much take your job and be like, okay, or your career, and be like, well, that's it. And I got him thinking about it, and I said, hey, and I put a disclaimer out there. I'm like, you do you, do what you want to do, because if you want to wrestle or you want to play football, in college, do it.
Yeah.
But it is a different field, because college sports and high school sports, there's a difference. There is a difference between like the amount of commitment you put in high school and the amount of commitment that you're going to put in and what they're going to expect from you in college.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of me being like, you know what, I had a good run, and I was lucky I never got hurt, knock on wood. And I was able to make it through my high school athletics career without any injuries, and then go into college and enjoy my time there, make a lot of friends, do a lot of different things that I didn't necessarily get involved in at the high school level, to the extent I did when I got into the college level. I was in drama club at high school.
I couldn't believe
but
it.
then I was actually I was in drama club in
college.
In college, I did get on the. I never got on the stage really in high school, but in college I did make it on the stage, and multiple times, for like some fairly big roles and multiple.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that time, and I think if I was committed to a sport, I wouldn't have done the things that I did. Habitat for Humanity, things like that I was able to get involved with in a branch of drama club being improv. To do all that stuff, it takes a lot of time on top of your school. But if you put a sport in there, I don't think I would have been as involved as I thought, or as I became if I was playing football. Because they did eventually have a football program.
Yeah, after, because
junior year,
they started
they came
the program,
in, and I did have a conversation with the coach at one point at the time, and I was like, I thought about it. I wasn't, I was probably like maybe like 215. So like at 215, you're like, I was a lineman in high school, but in college you're probably more like a linebacker type. So I talked to the coach, and after that conversation, I pretty much cemented the idea of the fact that it wasn't for me, because he was like, well, where were you this time, and what did this, and I'm like, why are you like, you're talking,
I
like,
remember you having that
talking
conversation.
down to me. I'm like, you're basically just getting started as a program,
Yeah.
and here I am going, hey, I'm interested, and now you're like telling me, well, where were you on day one? And I was like, well, you realize that, like, again, and I told him the same thing. I'm a fire science major. I want to be a firefighter. I had to contemplate whether or not I want to risk getting hurt here, if that does happen.
Mm.
And he just basically blew me off, and I said, all right, well, that's fine. I'm all set.
So, talking about the fire science program, when Andrew was talking about going to see colleges for different things, I will tell you, I thought my son was going to be a history teacher. Whenever he told me, he's like, I want to go to Anna Maria. I said, what do you want to go to? What? Like, what? What do you want to go there? He says, they got a great fire science program. I'm like, fire science? Like, where is this coming from? Well, your father's a fireman. I never heard my dad, like.
So unfortunately now at this point the audio starts to cut out. It lasts a couple of minutes here, so we'll just do a little brief voiceover. So my mother is talking about not necessarily the surprise of me wanting to be in fire science, but she talks about how my grandfather never seemed to encourage me to do it whatsoever. But I told her, obviously with my grandfather being a firefighter, the interest was always there, just never usually brought up. She talks about how when she was growing up, that the fire department used to use like a pull box system in town, where you would go, you pull down like a pull station lever, and then it would send out like a Morse code type thing that would signify where the fire was, depending on how many times the bell went off and like where the incident was. So they would respond to, what such and such street at this address. Um, she talks about how during when she was younger, they never really talked about a lot of things that happened at the fire service, at the fire department. That some things were left unsaid. She recalls only a few events where my grandparents actually talked to them about things that were happening. Sometimes that's the case now with myself and my family. I don't try to bring a lot of work home per se. I try to keep a lot of that stuff um, to myself or with my fellow firefighters, just because sometimes it's not in the best interest of your family to kind of tell them the kind of things that you see and stuff like that. And so my mom just kind of reiterates that that's something that my grandparents didn't do often. And she recalls an event where my grandfather falls through a porch at a fire. She said that she was never really worried that he wasn't going to come home because she always knew that he was going to come home. She cites it to the town being a small town, not really having a lot of significant fires. But as we all know, fires can be significant at all points. So we're going to get back to the normal audio, and hopefully you guys can enjoy the rest. Thanks for listening.
Especially that one when my dad fell through the porch. And thank God he wasn't hurt, and he wasn't hurt seriously, but nobody else was hurt too. I think about that for Andrew too. I try not to. I think earlier on I never really did. We're very fortunate here in Ludlow to have a great fire department, and we're fortunate that we don't have a lot of fires, thankfully, that anybody could, potentially get hurt or lose their lives. So I try not to think about those things as a mother, because you want to stay protective of your children. But I had no idea. I really didn't have any idea that Andrew wanted to be a firefighter. And he looks at me all the time with that face like, okay, Jaju, Like, why wouldn't you think I want to be? You know, we're from a town, a close-knit town. You know, my dad was a firefighter, my brother was a police officer, my nephew's a state trooper, my son's a firefighter, my husband worked for the DPW, my daughter's a teacher, I work as a parent, I work in the little schools. I mean, it's great. It's a great community. I wouldn't change it. Sometimes I think, you know, how can people just up and go? But as your children spread their wings and they grow their families, it's great that the kids are young and they want to see the grandparents all the time, but you know, as a grandparent, you want to stay hands-on and do as much as you can, because you know at some point they're not going to want to come around, and they'll come see you on your birthday, they'll come and see you, you know, Grandparents' Day, I don't know, but I try not to look for, I try to just have them over as much as I can. I am busy, and my husband says to me all the time, when you retire, like what are you going to do? Like, you're going to be, I'm like, I don't know. I like to volunteer. I like to do more. I like to help the kids. I mean, I take the grandkids all the time if I could. My husband does a lot. My husband does a lot especially for my daughter, and because she's right here if there's emergency. You know, I'm always, Mom, I'm like, I don't want to ask Dad. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, let me look at my calendar, because that calendar is my Bible. If I do not have my calendar, I cannot commit.
A physical calendar, not your phone calendar, a physical calendar.
Yeah, no, my sister even tells me, and my sister's not very technology either, and she says, well, put it in your phone. No, I can't, because that's
She's
something
gotta
else.
write it into her little book that she's had. Well, I mean, obviously it's not the same book because it's a yearly book.
Yeah, I can't live without that thing, and even Wayne is like, we have a calendar at home too, and I have to write everything on the calendar between the appointments, and I'm just a very social person, and I like to be involved in a lot of things, and I like to help people, and whenever I can volunteer, that's probably going to be me when I retire. I'm just going to be volunteer. I just won't know what to do with myself because I'll be all over the place trying to help out people. So.
Yeah, so back to the firefighting thing. I was going to actually ask you. I know that, and it wasn't a really story. And you kind of answered my question, anyways. But like, I always wondered, like, how did you feel about me wanting to be a firefighter at the time when you thought I was going to be a history teacher?
I just I don't know. I don't really think I felt one way or the other. I thought that I know you're very compassionate. Yeah. Andrew is just he's got a wonderful soul. He's just, him and my mom were like, oh, I get emotional because my mom.
Don't do that. Don't do that. No emotional.
It's no surprise. Andrew was my mother's favorite. Not that she didn't love all of them, she certainly did. But Andrew has a lot of compassion. I wasn't surprised when he was going in to be an EMT and a paramedic. I figured something medical, if he didn't want to be a teacher, something medical for him, because he's just, from what I could see, the way he was with people around him, and especially with his grandparents, just a lot of patience, and he's just a good-hearted boy. I guess I'm prejudiced because I'm his mother.
She's paid to say this, so.
And I just think I don't think I really had. I was surprised, and the reason I said the history teacher is because Andrew did very well. He had one of his teachers at the high school. They used to have great conversations, and and that teacher had told me what a great kid and how much he always wanted to learn. And he was fortunate enough to go to France with another teacher while he was in high school, and he brought me home the most beautiful scarf from the Monet Gardens. And I was like, you went to Monet? He goes, Mom. He said, they're just beautiful. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he loved the Louvre, the museum. And because when the kids were growing up, I did a lot to educate the kids. I felt like I did. We went to the museums. We went to not only the fun things, because we took them to Interskate and we went to, I don't know, Chuck E. Cheese, all those party things that the kids used to go to. But we've been to Springfield museums. Whenever we went on vacation, we always tried to find activities and things that were educational. Remember when we went to the Howe Caverns?
Mhm.
You talked about that with Jimmy.
I did.
And I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that. I am, as I've gotten a little bit older, I am afraid of heights, and I am kind of, no, it's heights. I'm not going to say claustrophobic. I do get a little iffy around crowds now, big crowds. Andrew never liked the city. I remember when we went on vacation, we took them to California with us. We went to San Francisco, and Andrew kind of enjoyed it. He saw the woman that was feeding the birds literally up when we took the cable car, because you have to do a turnaround, and I think you spoke with her a little bit. I'm not really sure if I remember that. I remember being in Los Angeles and him not liking it at all. I think the thing was it was crowded. The other thing was there was a lot of panhandling, a lot of people just sleeping everywhere, which kind of surprised me too. But he does not like going to the cities. He was okay when we went on our little field trips and stuff, but
Yeah,
going to New York, he's been to a few shows with us
Yeah.
and things like that, museums. We tried to make the kids well-rounded and to enjoy nature, enjoy the arts, enjoy history of all the states that we've been to. Because I'm a big thing. I love to go into the forts. I like to go to museums. Anything that's historical, Wayne and I like to do, and we like to take the kids, and we hope that they instill that in their children too, because there's so much history just in this. I wish we had traveled more with the kids, like more across the state, across the country, but we really couldn't afford to do all that because I wasn't really working, and the part-time at Randall's was good because that was like for all the little extras, that we needed. But I think the kids had I think they enjoyed everything that we did, and they
absolutely. We still talk about, to this time, obviously with Jim all the time, but
Jimmy,
we talk about these, the vacations and everything, and those like that and that made like the importance of going to these places and and sharing them with my family. I know because my family goes to Lake George, my family goes to Maine. We all go to Maine together. Even before that, we were going to Maine. We would go to New Hampshire. My wife and I go to, Christmas Farm Inn in Jackson, where my parents stayed when they were younger. And that's like, and it's important for me to share that part, because like I said, I want that for, I want that for my kids. I want, them to see the importance of that, and to share like these experiences with my wife, and them, so that we can, together, do that whole, it's, just as fun as going to Disney, we keep saying Disney, but it's just as fun, to travel around here in New England, like my mom said, with the history, the different things, and all like the different like what I was calling like roadside attractions.
Yeah.
I guess they're not really roadside attractions, but like you would think that they're like these like, you're driving down like Route 1 or Route 2, and you're just like, oh hey, there's Clark's Bears.
Yeah.
Or there's
Clark's Trading Post. We went there several times with the kids because when I was dating Wayne, his mother and father used to go to a lot of places. They used to go to Canada all the time. Before Wayne and I were married, we went up a couple times. His parents took me with them. We went up to Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. Not that it's bad on the United States side, but Canada, oh boy,
Yeah.
those flower gardens and everything were beautiful. I have to say though, I was worried about the falls, and we never took the kids to Niagara Falls. To this day, I am sorry that we didn't do that, because for years Wayne and I would go. That was our anniversary. We'd go up in September. We'd go for a week, and we'd stay there, and we haven't been back since. So since we had Amber, and we talked about it, and I was like, oh my God, someone's going to throw the kids over the, people are just crazy. They're going to throw them into the falls. Something's going to happen. I was just
even crazier now. So I can
I was
imagine.
I was paranoid about it, and I'm sorry. That's the only unfortunate thing. Then I don't know how I would have been with 2 kids in the car for 8 hours, because that's a heck of a trip when you're driving. And there's a whole lot of nothing going up. You're just trying to get to Buffalo. That's like 400 miles away.
Yeah.
So that's the only regret. I don't even want to call it a regret. It's just something sad that I wish we had done with the kids, because Wayne and I have so many great memories up there with his parents, just us. That was our anniversary trip, like for the first 5 years that we were married. And they're like, how do you go to Niagara Falls? Well, it's just so beautiful up there, and made to the Miss a half a dozen times going on. I don't think I could do, I'm definitely afraid of heights. I don't know how that happened, but I get very anxious and very agitated when I could never go up Mount Washington. I could never do the Cannon cable car again. I do remember Andrew talking on the podcast about going up Cannon Mountain, and that him and Amber were on the edge. I was literally in a panic, and I was yelling at my husband, get them out of there, oh my God, they're gonna fall, they're gonna fall, they're gonna fall. Like I was having so much anxiety, I thought I was gonna have a heart attack on the mountain. And I couldn't wait to get back down, and I haven't been up anything high since. And the other bad incident was when we went to see the Celtics play. That was a nightmare. But I did end up on the floor.
Yeah, she did end up getting her way to floor seats.
Yeah, floor seats that were like great for only a period.
Yeah, I was gonna say for 1/4 of the game.
Yeah, quarter of the game or whatever the hell they call them. But I think about things now, and I definitely, if I was going to a park with the kids, I probably couldn't watch them on anything, because just thinking about the Superman and all those crazy rides they used to go on, just talking about it, it's making me like shaky inside. I just get nervous about that. We were at Santa's Village, and there were a couple things we were going on, and we had Lane, and we were going to go on. It was like the Matterhorn, it goes really, really fast. And he was all excited for a while there, and then we were getting ready to go on. He's like, no, Grammy, I don't think I can do it. It's too fast for me. I'm like, no, Lane, it's going to be okay. Grammy, see, I can't even figure out who I am today. I said, Grammy will hold you. It'll be good. It's just going to go around. We'll listen to all the music, and we're going one more step. No, Grammy, I can't do it. I'm like, okay, come on. We won't go on.
Which is funny, because we go on it at, when we go to Funtown.
Yeah,
It
so.
was on the same ride. Me and him
But
on the
I don't
same
know,
ride
it
all
could
the
have
time.
been, whatever. Maybe he just didn't think I could protect him or whatever. But I certainly,
Hold on to him.
wouldn't let anything happen to
No,
any
absolutely
of my grandkids. But
All right, so as we wrap it up here, what is there, if anything, do you have anything else? Any other words of wisdom that you would like to share?
no, I don't think I have words of wisdom. I just think it's important to keep your family close, and just try to keep communications open. Anybody who knows me, I'm just a very loving, caring. I just like to make everybody happy. So, and I like to have my family and friends around me. So that's what makes me happy. I like everybody to be safe. I like everybody to get along. I just love my family. I love my family. Love my grandkids. They're like the best part of being married. I would have had more children. I would have liked to have at least one more, maybe two. But back in the times, I don't even know where we'd be now if we had, 3 or 4 kids, to be honest with you. It just wasn't, it wasn't in the cards to have more children, because I do love kids, and my grandkids are like everything. And I just smile when they're going crazy, The parents are like, stop this, do that. I'm like, it's rare that I get mad at them. And if I do, I'm always apologizing. But I like having those little 4 cherubs around, and they can do whatever they want. Frankly, I'm not going to say I don't care. I do, because they are the most time well behaved and they listen. But when the 4 of them are together, I'm laughing inside while everybody's freaking out. So that's my little secret. I just watch them, and I'm grateful that I have 2 loving children, and I love my son-in-law and daughter-in-law, and we have a good family dynamic. And we don't maybe sometimes always see eye to eye, but it's all good.
Well,
It's all good.
I can say firsthand that I will accredit that to the excellent example that you and Dad and my grandparents set for both myself and my sister. And again, with that being said, happy holidays, everybody. Hopefully everybody's enjoying themselves and their families. And you can expect this type of conversation, this podcast, and all the further episodes here on the Gabbin Goody Podcast.